Welcome to Umi and a Cup of Tea, the podcast from Umi where we discuss all things technology, marketing, hotels and travel. So grab yourself a tea, coffee or something stronger and we'll jump right in.
Okay, hello and welcome to Umi and a Cup of Tea. Today I will be hosting. I'm Laurence Pratt. I'm head of UX and UI at Umi Digital. And today the tables are turned, Harry. I'm going to be interviewing you.
The turns have tabled.
Yes, exactly. So how are you, Harry?
I'm very well, thank you, Laurence. Yeah, great to be on a podcast with you again. I can't remember the last time we were on together. A while ago. It might have even been on beers with Harry, Steve and Laurence way back when.
That certainly has happened before. I can't remember if it was the last day. I think it was maybe an Umi anniversary was a call that we had. It was recorded with Steve. But I do feel...
And it was very nostalgic.
It was a little bit, yeah. But I do think we've done a subject before, but I can't remember it now. But that leads me on to what is today's podcast about. Well, we've all heard of it. Automation. In today's modern digital world, all businesses all over the world are using digital transformation and becoming efficient with digital automation. But what does that mean for the hotel industry, and how can hoteliers automate their businesses? So that's why we've got you here today, Harry, the font of all knowledge of technology.
Very flattering.
So we're going to discuss a few areas where hotels can benefit from using automation. And we're going to look at those now. So what, just in a broad sense of what do you think the benefits of automation in general are?
So I like to think of automation in kind of two sort of categories, really. One is sort of in the intelligent automation part, which is really, enhancing one's ability to think and to kind of automate tasks that might actually be beyond the human brain slightly, or the easy comprehension of the human brain. And the other part of automation is just to eliminate grunt work. And
what do you mean by grunt work?
I mean things that might be being done perhaps by whether it's actually it could be junior all the way through to senior level person, but something that's quite repeatable. It's quite rule based. It might be a basic example might be sending automatic reminders to someone to check in before they've come. Now that's something that most hotels would have automated anyway, but that's a great example. Imagine the resource required to actually send those out manually, and the same methodology goes all the way through loads of different departments. And there are, even though those sorts of things are very clearly automated these days, there are quite a lot of activities that are still being done quite manually, and so it's taking the repeatable rule-based tasks that one is doing oneself and actually turning those into automatic technical mechanics that can be sort of set running and then optimized over time.
So the headlines there are save time, which obviously can save costs, and essentially add a little intelligence to our toolkit as well.
And also reliability, if there are sort of rule-based marketing approaches, these things that will always be more reliable than people, I'd say. If they're set up correctly, they don't get ill, they don't get sick, they there's no Christmas parties to recover from the next day. There's an element of reliability as well.
So essentially automation requires a little bit of setup in the initial beginning, but then once it's set up, it can assist you to stay on track, I suppose.
Yes, I think so. And I think the key really is to treat it as an ever-evolving thing. Certainly marketing automations around guest communication. You can set things up with a clearly defined funnel. But that's not to say that that's the only way it should ever be. It's about baking in key performance indicators and tracking and statistics into your automation, so that you can always have a health check on how that's going. Because it's not being done by a person, one needs to be able to gauge the health of any process in a way that they might not be able to actually. If you're doing it yourself, you'll have that very quick response as to whether something's working or not. So yeah.
Yeah, you just mentioned there an interesting point. You mentioned guest messaging, and I suppose the guest is quite important, in as much as we have to work with guests' expectations these days. And as I was saying before, businesses all over in all industries are using automations to keep their communications flowing, and with hotels, a service-based industry where communication face-to-face is supremely important, guests are now expecting that level of communication, quick communication, as standard now. So I suppose it's also largely keeping up with the Joneses a little bit, and making sure that hotels' messaging and communication is what the guests expect.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I've got a list of questions to go through, a list of areas that we can talk about automation. So I will start off with then by asking you about system integration services. Now, firstly, tell me, system integration services, what's that, and how can automation help?
Goodness me. Right. So the hotel industry is notoriously complex when it comes to systems, and the reason for that is it's just everything's developed at different paces and at different times. The on-premise property management system started out as a sort of the bedrock of everything, on some MS-DOS situations, heating the reception desks around the country, and then as we are sort of opened up distribution, so that channels appeared, distribution channels appeared. One had to be able to pull out information from the PMS into channel managers, and subsequently we've now got sort of revenue management systems. We've got key cards, we've got booking engines, we've got all sorts of different areas of technology operating simultaneously within a hotel, and there can be sort of 15 or 20 different systems working at any one time. Now, I'm going to look at it firstly through a bit of a marketing lens. Now, from a marketing perspective, all of this information is incredibly siloed, right? Within all of the different platforms that you have, there is a complete guest picture in there, but very rarely are the jigsaw pieces ever put together to actually create a full picture. Now, the first area of automation that I'd like to talk a little bit about is around connectivity, and actually automating the synchronization of data across all of these different platforms. So that's something that we might think, if we think about what we might have in place at the moment, it might be automatically, an online travel agent might put a booking via the channel manager into the property management system. That's automated. That's not changing anywhere. But further automations might include, okay, well, let's now pull that straight out into CRM system. How about we actually pull that out into a data lake, which is also taking a feed of inbound email inquiries or inbound live chat conversations, perhaps even information from a connected keycard system as to popular times that people are moving through the lobby and checking into their rooms and things like that. So I often kind of confuse connectivity with automation. Not in the sense that I don't know what each mean, but I kind of use them interchangeably sometimes, because automation is the product of using connectivity well, in my opinion. If you're looking at the kind of the business holistically, and the vast majority of hotel systems now do have connectivity built in, and it should be a massive part of your decision making when it comes to choosing technology. But there has to be a very active step that one needs to take to actually ensure that all of the different pieces of the puzzle do fit together in an automated way, and you have to ensure you really know where that central source of truth is. Is it your PMS? Is it a central? Is it a customer data platform? Is it your CRM system? And then the idea, particularly with a marketing hat on, is how we're going to automate the feed of data into whatever central source of truth you choose it to be.
Mm-hmm. So it's a case of getting all those different siloed bits of kit talking to one another, and then whoever is then responsible for gaining insights from that information, that they can actually do that in one central place, so that it's a lot easier than hopping in and out of all these other different softwares. So it is apart from all that setup that's required, what does that central source look like? Have you got any examples?
Do you know what this is? I believe this to be the kind of next holy grail of hotel tech, really. And I know I've had some good conversations with lots of colleagues and clients and friends about it, and no one's really done it that well yet. Because should it be the property management system? Should the property management system be the main point of this central source of truth? Potentially. But we also then have to recognize that pretty much the entire marketing funnel and the way that our guests interact with us before they stay, with their intentions, is very rarely fed into the PMS. But CRM systems are much better at handling the pre-stay and the post-stay in relationship with the guests. So they'll be able to see, have they visited the website? What did they search for? What email campaigns did they click on? And so there's kind of different systems that are good at different parts of all of this. And at the moment, there is no, like, CRM systems are purely, columns and rows of contact information primarily. Yes, they're enhanced and augmented by stuff pulled from the PMS, like lifetime value and things like that. But it's not a true customer data platform. Similarly, the PMS doesn't really contain much of the marketing information as well. So I don't think they're actually, in terms of a piece of this kind of like idea of this data lake that sits in the middle that can pull everything together and then actually facilitate proper automation. That I don't think that exists properly yet. So I think that's the next frontier, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So just before we move on to the next one, so essentially is the message to any listeners is check your current systems that you've got and make sure that you've fully set up that communication between all your different software.
I would say it's not in all cases. It's not necessarily possible to feed everything into everything. However, I highly recommend you just challenge the current platforms that you have. For as an example, you can directly feed reservations coming out of property management systems into into dashboards, into CRM systems, so you can actually populate CRM systems like MailChimp and stuff that isn't even hospitality specific using data feeds from your PMS. So if you do have a very hospitality specific CRM system, it might do that itself. That's fine. Similarly, there are data feeds coming out from like Google Ads and from your website forms and all of this stuff, and that all this data can be pushed and pulled quite readily, but very rarely is it ever done properly.
So, in your experience, do the software support teams, do they offer a lot of assistance in integration, or is it something that's requires a lot of manual work from the hotels themselves, or are there in fact any tools that allow these two systems to communicate?
There are. So I find this a little bit tricky in the sense that you've got two two types of hotel tech company, I think. You have the ones that are designed to be a service, right? And what they want to do is effectively close the loop. They want to own, maybe the website piece, the channel management piece, the booking engine piece, and they want to, they're not that incentivized to really empower the connectivity of things, because as long as you're within their ecosystem, everyone's fine. And so do they really want to open it up and risk losing parts of, verticals within their business? So that's one school of thought. That's if you treat it as a service. The other school of thought is if you treat what you're building as a platform. So an example of a platform being built is something like Muse, right? Where they encourage people to develop off the top of them. And they do have a booking engine. They have their distributor booking engine, but also they provide a booking engine API so that you can just go and create your own one very easily. Similarly, like Hotel Time as well, another PMS. They also have a completely open API which allows you to build channels and push and pull any information that you'd ever find in the PMS into any, whatever you want to do. And so they're saying, right, we're not going to try and close the loop. We're going to act as an innovative platform on which everyone else can be creative. And I think you've really got two quite distinct schools of thought in the way people approach this. So in response to your question, are people helpful? I really think it's where someone falls on in those different camps, really. The more traditional business is more likely to fall into the service camp, and they're probably going to be more cagey on integrations and supporting integrations, or at least have a particularly long nondescript roadmap of what's coming next. It's often a buzzword, and they want to say that they are, but they might not actually be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next one then. Next on the list is business intelligence reporting. So, Harry, tell us about business intelligence reporting and how can we automate that?
So I think before we get into any systems, we sort of have to question, why are we doing this? What is the point of this? Because I've found, I've been doing this whole agency thing for a while now, and I know for a fact that a lot of time goes into monthly reports. However, I'd say the majority of that time historically has been fetching and presenting data. It's fetching, how many users do we have? How much revenue? What's the difference in conversion rate? And essentially spitting that back to a client, a hotel or a travel company, with, maybe 40% of the time being spent on the commentary and the insight behind that. Now, for us, and this is kind of trying to do it at scale across a whole lot of different accounts, but the data piece should, I believe that shouldn't just be a monthly huge piece of work to screenshot everything, to capture all the data, to put it in, to package it all up. That should be largely automated, because there's all of the different tracking tools that we use all have connectivity, and one such way of doing that is using something like Google Data Studio, or I think it's called Looker Studio now, which can pull in information from Google Ads, from Google Analytics, from social media and everything, CRM, etc. But it also can take custom feeds as well. So you can take custom feeds from the PMS, from the booking engine, etc. And that's just a way of presenting the data. Now, I think that for me, the presentation of data, while it's always useful to be able to see month on month, year on year, and everything, it should be a routine of checking it very, very regularly. Where are we? Where are we as a percentage of where we need to be this month? Where do we need to pick up? What's falling short, etc. Rather than just ignoring it for a month, checking in on it, periodically. So that whole visualization of data and understanding how we're getting on can largely be automated. And then if you have, I think the role of whether it's the agency or the marketing director or whatever, is actually to spend time on the insight. Okay, well, what does this mean? And actually 80% of the time really should be on adding value rather than, effectively echoing information that's, perfectly possible to automate the delivery of.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience of looking at Google Analytics, starting with that, there's with data such as that, it's quite easy to just think that one metric is important for some reason, and you track it over time, and you look at it and you go, oh great, that's gone up, or oh, that's gone down. But it's not until you actually question it as to why it may have gone up or why it may have gone down, and what impact that has on the business. Do you get any value out of it? Because you can't react to it unless you fully understand the implications of why these things have gone up or down. So I suppose that there's that insight and summary that needs to be interrogated, really, with the. It's all well and good having these data dashboards, but if you don't know what they mean, then you can't really.
Your point around the reacting to things is a really good one there, because one thing that as you rightly said, if you look at it at the end of the month and you realize you fell short on traffic, you could probably tell that by the first few days, right? If you were tracking below where you should be. So one thing we use quite a bit is alerts and parameters. So for example, if an ad campaign falls below its how much it should be spending from a budget perspective, it alerts us. We have a feed, an email feed. We have an email feed of the percentage of allocated budget spent per account per day. So, I had I saw a bunch of alerts this morning saying, right, we use 70% of the budget for December. I look at the date, 19th. Yeah, sounds about right. Cool, done. And similarly, you can attach that to all sorts of different things. So understanding what is a healthy threshold to be at, and making sure that any deviations from those parameters you are alerted to, so that you can actually address things. And that's perfect example of automation. We often in the tech world, we often call it a canary. We have so for example, every time you have a server, for example, and if it doesn't respond within a certain amount of time, it alerts you. The same way that canaries were used down in mines when they started getting upset because there was a gas leak.
Yeah. So I suppose then what we're saying is you can schedule these reports, whether it be monthly or weekly, and what you're saying is but you don't want to keep your head stuck in the sand until you come to review that report. You can maybe set up alerts for some of these key metrics, particularly a key metric, like you said, like if it's ad spend or something like that, something that's actively costing you money. If that's not working as it should be, you certainly want to be alerted to that, so you can course correct before it's too late. So there's two useful bits then: schedule reports and set up alerts for key metrics. Anything else on business intelligence reporting?
So it slightly goes back to my point of pulling everything together. Like, there's so many different silos of data, so it's making sure that whether that's an easy sort of plug and play integration with something like Google Data Studio, or actually pulling data or creating those links. So when you create those links, you can, like Google Data Studio, you can feed your reports and your dashboards with any data that has an API that has connectivity. So that's going to be a combination of development work and plug and play, or just set up stuff. But and also another tip would be to not try and automate stuff that's kind of meaningless, because automated emails and reminders, if they're not important, you just gloss them over. You just ignore pretty much all of them. We have a project management dashboard called Monday.com, and there's certain boards in there that I don't need to be a part of, but I do get the alerts, and you become completely phased out of the alerts if they're not critical to your business. So don't try and over communicate information that's not that important. Does receiving this alert actually change the way I do my day? Then yes, that's important. But But if it's just a kind of nudge, which you could have maybe once a week, and getting it every day, maybe not.
Yeah, I can think of a time where during lockdown I got into the whole exercising thing, and I set up daily reminders to do a HIIT workout, or do some yoga or something, and then I can still look at my calendar now, and those tasks still generate each morning, but I stop doing them, and I've become blind to them. So if you're doing everything, you can get overwhelmed with things and then become blind to them. So that, I think that's a good thing to mention.
My one's usually on the train as my stomach's rumbling, and I get a reminder to have breakfast. Oh crap.
Yeah, I think it is a good thing. I mean, to summarize that point that you made, I think it is good for a hotel to really focus on what metrics are important to them. What they need to be tracking over time, whether they can maybe compare that year on year with how well you're doing in this month compared to last month. But yeah, like you say, don't set up alerts for everything just because you can. Really focus on what you think is important to you, whether it be for the year or a quarter, and really check in on those. Okay, great stuff. And make pretty graphs as well.
Everyone loves a pretty graph.
Yeah. What's your favourite graph?
Oh, wow. I didn't know we'd have to go to such a personal question so quickly.
I like the donut pie chart.
Donut pie charts.
Just because it reminds me of.
I think my favourite graph is the sort of a cumulative. I don't even know the name of it really, but it's like a cumulative line graph whereby you've got the total, and then you've got of over time along the x-axis, and then you sort of have lots of smaller lines within the total area of it, so that you can see the contribution of various different aspects to the total over time. I find that quite an enjoyable graph.
And I think I was actually just joking about the pretty graphs, but actually thinking about it, it is quite important that the graphs do actually make sense. Because I remember in a previous job that I had, my boss said, and do we ever swear on this podcast?
I'll bleep you out.
I don't. Well, he said bullshit baffles. And essentially I think that was when people that came up and asked questions, if he said something highbrow enough, they'd go, "Oh, that sounds about right," and then they'd go away thinking that he'd answered their thinking that their question had been answered, but they didn't know what he'd actually said. But he was quite aware that if you just say it highbrow enough, then they'll go away. And I think that's important with graphs or any data that you present. It's got to make sense to everybody who's going to be looking at it, because otherwise it's going to be unreadable, and it's just going to be that thing that you check every week, month, quarter, or whatever, and you don't know why you're checking it. You don't even know if it's performing any better. So make sure you do actually choose an appropriate way of presenting that.
I was sent a couple of hotels were looking to move their services over to us recently, and I was sort of sent a bit of an example of how the performance was going so far. I had a couple of reports sent through to me, and they were like 6 pages long of purely graphs of like page views and bounce rates and all of this stuff, and 90% of it wouldn't actually impact your decision making on a daily basis. They were just, because the data's there, I'm going to spit it back, because a 6-page report is better than a 1-page report. For example, having a breakdown of like bounce rate by blog post, and it is fine, and there can be value from it, but is that the headline? Is that something you want to put as a headline figure in a management report? No. you'd probably look into that if you were trying to diagnose problems or find opportunities, but you wouldn't. It's not a key performance indicator.
Yeah, so I suppose if you're preparing a report for a client or a manager, the essential thing is just tell me what what these things mean and how it's affecting the business, rather than look at all these graphs. There we go, job done. Okay, cool. Right then, well, the next one is optimized pricing and rate utilization. Tell us about that,
Goodness
Harry.
me, this is getting into the realms of revenue management, which is certainly not something I can claim to be particularly good at. But my I fortunately know a few people that are quite clever at it, so I've sort of picked up various bits of intelligence from them. But I think for me, this part is in its infancy with regard to what can actually be achieved. And the reason I say that is because historically, you have revenue management kind of looking at past data and also, but a combination of looking at past data and looking at the competition to suggest to effectively yield manage properly. And by yield manage, set the rates for the maximum possible profitability. Now, where there's been a massive disconnect has been feeding that decision making with different determinants of demand. So if we look at all the determinants of demand, there are loads. There are currency fluctuations. There's political sentiment. There's events in the area. There are World Cups. There are all sorts of differing determinants of demand. And I'd say it's really hard to understand to factor all of these sorts of things in, and B, what weighting should we give them, right, when we come to starting to automate these things. But I think one of the and that's not for me to comment on how one would go about it, and how would one go about doing that. There are revenue management systems that are starting to do that, and starting to look outside of the PMS and outside of general sort of the industry to look at other things. But you need a lot of money to go to win in that game. And AI, this is a great actual genuinely good use of AI. There's a lot of crap uses for AI in our industry, but this is a good one where you can actually look over huge data sets and start really understanding the effect of rate on profitability, the effect of demand on rate, how elastic is your demand curve, how elastic is your supply curve, all of these kind of things. So that's good. But I think one of the great automations that I'm pushing for with a couple of revenue management systems actually at the moment is matching up all of the desired data, the desired sort of ARI, so availability rates and inventory, with what is actually booked. Because, as an example, in November, we saw return on ad spend drop quite significantly across a number of ad campaigns. Now, initial response is to panic, and you go, oh, well, why is that? Maybe, what's gone wrong? Has Google suddenly changed something we didn't know about, or what? And interestingly, when we dug into it, we could see that the results of all those clicks were actually searching for dates that were already full. And so the conversion rate of the booking engine had gone significantly down, not the percentage of people that actually searched for information. Now, most of the time, the booking engine won't give you searched dates. They'll just give you reservations. Whereas on our new platform, we're able to track every single search, so you can actually match up how popular certain, what is our searched booking window, not just what is our booked booking window. What is our search booking window? What is the popular dates coming up? Where should we be? And as a result, that has to inform revenue and rate setting. It just logically it absolutely does, because the whole process of yielding is adjusting price based on demand. And if revenue management are able to access the searched data in the marketing phase, that's a great automation to have. That's a great thing to start feeding together.
So just allow me to ask a couple of questions, because this is something that's not really in my domain at all. So, when you say currently, when you're optimizing price, you're looking at a few different things. You said there was looking at availability, and then there was also looking at search demand. So is that looking at the PMS and also information that's coming from the booking engine? And just added on to that, is there the ability to look at competitors' prices at all?
Yes, so you can. So there's sort of the traditional ways of doing that through things like STR and various industry reports and benchmarking of where people are currently sat from a pricing perspective. The other way to do it is through just, you might have a few kind of earmarked competitors that you know where to look, and so you're always constantly keeping a tab of those. A little bit how a stockbroker might keep tabs on a whole bunch of different shares at any one go. They'll most likely keep a tab on what competitors are doing what at any one time. But I think the key part here is I'm not necessarily just talking about pulling data purely from the PMS. It's making sure that we're recording all of that in the marketing stage, in the middle of the funnel, really, and making sure that data is then available back to the revenue managers, so that they can actually make decisions based on a whole other data set, which, to be honest, most of the time people don't even have.
So I'm guessing then we're probably in a similar situation when we were talking about the first one, which was system integration. That you might have the job of having to look in various different places to get all these important bits of data, and it's a question of putting those together so it makes sense to the revenue manager. Okay. And how does that affect? I mean, if a hotel revenue manager is changing pricing on a regular basis, I mean, how often are the hotels changing their prices?
Well, I was having a good conversation with Robert Holland recently from Hotel Partner, and he recently published an article around trying to move away from seasonal pricing, because there are still quite a few hotels that will have a high season rate and a low season rate, and which is fine, but also you leave a huge amount of money on the table when you do that, because you're not factoring in things like Friday night or Saturday night being more popular than the week. Just basic things like that. Now, so genuinely, the more the better, really. I would say, as I said, I'm not a revenue manager, but I know that if you are able to rapidly respond to peaks and troughs in searches, you're going to be able to maximize the yield. So as an example, like King's Coronation, right? That when I think that was announced in the late afternoon, I think. Now there are a number of hotels that then came back the next morning, having been completely booked out at a rate that was like a tenth of what they could charge, because there's no trigger, there's no automation, there's no element of, okay, well, I've seen a massive surge here, I'm going to lock off my availability, or I'm going to shoot my prices up as a result of this spike in demand. So a lot of money was left on the table in those initial early pieces.
If we're thinking about this ability to respond to cultural events or whatever's going on in your area, is there something that we can do? Because you mentioned with the the data alerts, you can get Google alerts for all sorts of things, can't you? So I wonder, is that something that a revenue manager can do? So set up parameters for Google alerts when they come out for things specific to your area? So
you can do Google alerts, yeah, absolutely. But I think rather than trying to, the first, if you're going to try and understand all the determinants of demand, like all possible venues, all possible, all possible macroeconomic conditions that might lead to the demand at your hotel, I mentioned earlier that's going to take a huge amount of money to do that properly. So the second way is to react to search data. For example, I could quite easily set up an alert to say, if there's more than X number of searches in a 10-minute period on my website, shoot me an alert, right? So that I can get that, because obviously searches happen before the booking. So that might be one way of alerting, or having a parameter of an average number of searches per hour, and if we deviate outside of that, then maybe shoot me an alert or shoot.
So essentially, you're saying, tell me when a lot more people are searching on the website, and then you can jump on and try and figure out what may be going on that's happening, that is causing.
I mean, for us at the moment, we're tracking every single search, like every pieces of search data on the sites that we got this set up for, which I'm trying to get more and more on board. But because that number is available, that's a live feed of information. We can very easily set up parameters to do that. But yeah, so I think that would be a great use of automation, because it's just alerting. It's very, very time sensitive and valuable stuff that no human in their right mind would be able to do 24/7.
Mm-hmm. This is a slightly different question, but regarding optimizing prices and rates. Now, obviously, we want to encourage direct bookings, and therefore we want to make sure that the prices that we're offering on hotel websites are in some way offering a better incentive to book direct with the hotel and not the OTA. How does changing your prices affect the prices that are being offered on the OTA, and is that something to be wary of?
Well, you theoretically, right, should be offering the same rates to the OTAs as you do on your own website. So, and the whole role of the channel manager is to synchronize that across the board. So a lot of the time people will change their rates directly in the channel manager. Some people change it in the PMS, and it is synchronized from there, because you've got rate codes that are effectively so you'll have rate synchronized across the board. However, what you can do is, as long as it's a closed community, such as a members area or some kind of protected content that requires as I said, that sort of closed nature of a relationship with a guest or a prospect, you can offer your own stuff, members rates and loyalty rates and various things like that, and you don't have to pass those rates through to the OTAs. You can have the OTA rates that are being sent out, and you don't have to push everything to them. Similarly, you don't have to push all your inventory there as well. And a big bold step that people can start taking is, if they really want to shift their the needle on the percentage of direct business, is actually starting to lock down inventory, and have the confidence to say, I think we can. If I want to make sure I'm going to be 40% direct business, 50% direct business, whatever, actually starting to lock down maybe 30% and saying, right, I'm going to allocate 30 to myself. Because so often, you can have the best ad campaign in the world, but if you don't withhold inventory to be able to actually deliver on that, having been booked out via OTAs, you never give yourself a chance, really.
I think we've slightly wandered onto a topic that I really think we ought
As
to
a
do.
separate chat.
An episode all on its own about direct bookings and how we can set ourselves up to have a compelling direct booking offer, and the ins and outs of that. I mean, and even setting up on your data studio dashboard to track, how much direct bookings you're getting, and then track the progress of your direct booking strategy over time. But we'll leave a pin in that for another time. Okay, we still have lots more automation information to come. That rhymed, I didn't mean it to. But we know that you guys are very busy people, so we're going to split this episode into 2 parts. That'll be all for part 1. And if you check your podcast feed, we will follow up quite shortly with part 2. Okay, so thanks very much for listening to part 1, and we'll see you very soon.